In his annual Thanksgiving address, President Obama explained Thanksgiving as one of our nation's oldest and most cherished traditions. He went on to state that the day recalls the celebration of an autumn harvest centuries ago when the Wampanoag tribe joined the Pilgrims of Plymouth Colony to share in the fruits of a bountiful season. The feast honored the tribe for generously extending their knowledge of local game and agriculture to the Pilgrims. President Obama continued, "Though our traditions have evolved, the spirit of grace and humility at the heart of Thanksgiving has persisted through every chapter of our story. In times of adversity and times of plenty, we have lifted our hearts by giving humble thanks for the blessings we have received and for those who bring meaning to our lives. As we gather in our communities and in our homes, around the table or near the hearth, we give thanks to each other and to God for the many kindnesses and comforts that grace our lives." His address was not much unlike other presidents' Thanksgiving speeches. They typically all acknowledge the importance of Thanksgiving as an American tradition, the role of the holiday in bringing together families for a time of thanks and gratitude, and the gratitude the American population has for the Native Americans. While Obama acknowledged the Wampanoag tribe in his speech, he leaves out the rest of the story. The real story of the first Thanksgiving. The first Thanksgiving Day did occur in the year 1637, but it was nothing like our Thanksgiving today. On that day, many years ago, the Massachusetts colony governor, John Winthrop, proclaimed such a Thanksgiving to celebrate the safe return of a band of heavily armed hunters, all of whom were colonial volunteers. The volunteers had just returned from their journey to Mystic, Connecticut, where they had massacred 700 Pequot Indians. Though this day has long been forgotten by most white people, it is still fresh in the mind of many Native Americans. A group calling themselves the United American Indians of New England meet each year at Plymouth Rock on Coles Hill for what they say is a day of mourning. They gather at the feet of a statue of their chief to remember the long-gone Pequot Indians. They do not call it Thanksgiving, there is no feast, and there is no football game afterwards. In the words of the United American Indians of New England, Thanksgiving is a celebration of the Pilgrim mythology. Though it is far from the truth, according to this mythology, when the Pilgrims arrived, the native people found them and welcomed them. And then the Indians promptly faded into the background, and everyone lived happily ever after. The mythology of Thanksgiving has recreated it as a day of American identity and culture. Now Americans think of turkey, feasts, and football when it comes to the holiday. This scene has been ingrained into the history of this culture. But the feast that was first celebrated in the 17th century wasn't just as we envision it today. There have been many cultural factors that have shaped our perception of Thanksgiving. From early on in our childhood, textbooks, picture books, and TV shows put a picture in our mind of pilgrims feasting with their new Indian friends. One such show, A Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, retells the first Thanksgiving.
They lay anchor in Plymouth on November 16th. On land, they discover a miracle. Much land has been cleared, probably by some Indians, though again there are no Indians in sight. There is much land suitable for planting crops, and much land on which to start building their settlement. A week after arrival, they start building their common house. But at this moment of high hopes, tragedy starts to stalk the Pilgrims. The 3 months of forced confinement aboard the Mayflower start. In early March, the survivors must make a decision. Shall they return to England on the Mayflower, or shall they try to survive in the wilderness? And then, a miracle. Look, Linus! He's not carrying any weapons.
Welcome, Englishmen. My name's Samoset. My people welcome you to our land. He speaks English. Welcome, Englishmen.
Welcome. And who might you be?
My name's Samoset. My people welcome you to our land.
Chief Massasoit and the Pilgrims have signed a treaty of friendship and of mutual assistance. And finally, in September and October, the most bountiful harvest the Pilgrim farmers had ever seen. Chief Massasoit brings 90 of his Indian tribe to join the 50 Pilgrims for a feast of Thanksgiving.
Charlie Brown, a well-known show throughout America, epitomizes the reshaping of reality into a myth that shows our country and ancestors in a positive light. There are many other aspects of the story that have come to symbolize Thanksgiving. Many homes decorate with symbols of Thanksgiving, including horns of plenty, dried corn, and turkeys. Parents tell the popularized story of the first Thanksgiving to their children, and these children then may go and participate in some sort of school reenactment of Thanksgiving by dressing as a pilgrim or an Indian and sharing a meal. Although these help create a sense of national identity, family and thankfulness in children and parents, many of these commonly believed origins and enacted rituals are based on the myth similar to that told in the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. The day of Thanksgiving itself is chock full of rituals that symbolize the ideal American society. First, let's look at the feast. What comes to mind is the turkey and the large assortment of foods that accompany the main dish. The feast is normally one that bodes well for overconsumption and a long duration spent around the table with family. The feast brings the family together around a table that boasts prosperity and plentifulness. Even in a poor economic situation, Thanksgiving is a time to splurge on food and provide for an idyllic meal. While imagining the feast, one must also look at the efforts that go into putting food on the table. Traditionally, the women spend the day in the kitchen while the men enjoy watching the parade and football games. In my family, the day goes similarly. Even though there are countless feminist, independent women in my family, on Thanksgiving, the women do the cleaning, preparations, and servings, while the men enjoy the show. In fact, the only time the men are really involved in the kitchen is when cutting the turkey takes place. Somewhere during our history, Thanksgiving became a holiday that doubled as a domestic occasion equipped with the means to perpetuate gender roles within the society. Today, in a society that may not conform with the original American dream, celebrating Thanksgiving in this fashion serves as a source of nationalism. In a primarily nuclear family society, Thanksgiving brings together generations and allows the mother to put aside any other obligations she has and focus on her maternal nature as a caregiver. In this highly feminine occasion, football has now allowed men to masculinize the celebration. But Thanksgiving is more than parades, turkey, and football. It is part of how we use myth and ritual to understand our origins as Americans. We see that the mythology revolving around Thanksgiving includes the retelling of the first Thanksgiving, but also the enacting of Thanksgiving in present-day society. But if Thanksgiving wasn't the picturesque celebration our society has chosen to remember it as, why then is participation in the mythology so integral in our role as an American? Is it because, as Americans, we feel the need to believe that the country we live in was founded on integrity or cooperation? Or maybe it is because, by recreating the first Thanksgiving, we are able to picture our country as a melting pot, one with many different people living in harmony. Whatever the reason behind the myth and rituals, it is clear that the way in which we imagine Thanksgiving is not in mourning, but rather in celebration and thanks. The celebration is essential for one's cultural understanding of what it means to be American. Rituals and celebrations like this bring the country together, and as a result, they become ingrained in our collective imagination. Though it is clear that the symbols associated with Thanksgiving are ingrained in our culture, our country has witnessed how it is possible to shape myths such as Thanksgiving. Thus, as modern politics continue and our history becomes more transparent, it is possible that this myth, at least the one concerning the first Thanksgiving, maybe remolded. Though Thanksgiving will likely always be America's holiday for thanks, maybe one day it will also include a more accurate retelling of the origins of this myth.